In 1918, a young Hutterite woman named Maria Hofer traveled by train across 3 states to reach Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Her husband, Joseph, was dying inside a military prison. He was 23 years old, he had never held a weapon, he had refused to put on a uniform, and the United States Army punished him for it. First at Alcatraz, where he was chained to the bars of a cell door with his toes barely touching the floor, fed only bread and water, and beaten by guards in total darkness. Then he was transferred to Leavenworth, 8 days after the war had already ended. When Maria arrived, Joseph could barely speak. He died the next morning. When she was taken to see his body, the Army had dressed him in the military uniform he had refused to wear in life. His brother Michael died 3 days later. Their crime was the same crime their ancestors had been dying for since 1528. They believed that Christians must not kill. They believed that everything they owned belonged to the community. And they believed these things so completely that no government on earth could force them to stop. Most people have heard of the Amish. Most people have heard of the Mennonites. Almost nobody has heard of the Hutterites, the third branch of the same Anabaptist tree. They are the oldest surviving communal society in the Western world. 50,000 people, over 500 colonies, spread across the prairies of Montana, the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Western Canada. Same roots, same persecution. A completely different answer to the question of how to live. The Anabaptist movement began in Zurich in 1525 with an act of rebellion. Adults baptized each other, rejecting the authority of both the Catholic Church and the Protestant reformers. The movement splintered almost immediately. One group followed Menno Simons and became the Mennonites. Another followed Jakob Ammann in 1693 and became the Amish. But the third branch, the earliest of the 3 to organize, formed in 1528 when a group of roughly 200 Anabaptist refugees in Moravia did something none of the others would ever do. They laid a cloak on the ground. They placed everything they owned on top of it. And they declared that from that moment forward, no member would hold private property. Everything, every tool, every coin, every loaf of bread would belong to the community. This was not a metaphor. This was not a spiritual ideal that would soften over time. This was a binding, permanent commitment to what they called Gemeinschaft, community of goods. They took it from the book of Acts, chapters 2 and 4, where the early Christians in Jerusalem held all things in common, and no one claimed that anything belonging to him was his own. The Hutterites read those passages and said, "We will do exactly that." They have been doing it for nearly 500 years. If you want to understand communities like this, how they form, how they survive, and why they endure, subscribe to this channel. That is what we do here. The man who organized them was Jakob Hutter, a hat maker from the Tyrolean Alps. Hutter did not found the movement. Communal Anabaptist groups existed before him, but he organized them, unified them, and gave them a structure that would outlast his own life by centuries. He made several dangerous trips between Tyrol and Moravia, shepherding refugees to safety, building colonies, and establishing the governance system that still operates today. In 1535, Hutter was captured near Clausen in the Tyrol. He was taken to Innsbruck, tortured, and burned alive at the stake on February 25, 1536. He was in his mid-30s. His followers named themselves after him, not as a monument to a leader, but as a reminder of what the commitment costs. What followed was 4 centuries of migration driven by persecution. From Moravia to Hungary, from Hungary to Romania, from Romania to Russia, where Catherine the Great offered the Hutterites military exemption and land in exchange for farming the Ukrainian steppe. For 100 years, the arrangement held. Then the Russian czars revoked the exemption and demanded assimilation. From 1874 to 1877, all 800 surviving Hutterites emigrated to the United States. They settled in South Dakota. About half had stopped practicing communal living during the Russian years. These eventually merged into Mennonite congregations. The other half reestablished 3 communal colonies, each led by a different elder. These 3 colonies became the 3 branches, the Schmiedeloot, the Dariusloot, and the Leroit that still exist today. And then America tested them the same way every other country had. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, the Hutterites' pacifism collided with a nation gripped by wartime fever. 4 young men from a Hutterite colony in South Dakota, 3 brothers named Joseph, Michael, and David Hofer, and their brother-in-law Jakob Whipf, were drafted in the spring of 1918. They reported as ordered. They refused to put on uniforms. They refused to comply with any military command. All 4 were court-martialed and sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. They were sent to Alcatraz, then a military prison years before it became the famous federal penitentiary. At Alcatraz, they were thrown into solitary confinement in what was called the hole. They received half a glass of water per day and no food. They were subjected to high cuffing, with hands chained to the tops of their cell doors, arms crossed, feet barely touching the floor. Guards beat them periodically. They lived in total darkness. Rats moved through the cells around them. In November 1918, 8 days after the armistice was signed and the war ended, the 4 men were transferred to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. Joseph and Michael, weakened beyond recovery, complained of sharp pains in their chests. Joseph died on November 29th. Michael died on December 2nd. The Army listed pneumonia as the cause. The Hutterite Church concluded they died from cruel mistreatment. The Hofer brothers became the Hutterites' Modern Martyrs, Exhibit A, in the National Civil Liberties Bureau's case against the U.S. government's treatment of conscientious objectors. Their deaths triggered an exodus. Within months, nearly every Hutterite colony in South Dakota relocated to Canada, where the government offered military exemption. They had done this before, packed up everything and moved to the next country that would let them live according to their conscience. They had been doing it since 1528. Today, there are over 500 Hutterite colonies across Western Canada and the northern United States, home to roughly 50,000 people. And the way they live would be unrecognizable to their Amish and Mennonite cousins. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. We explore the communities the world talks about, but never takes the time to understand. A Hutterite colony is not a village. It is a commune, a self-contained economic unit, operating as a single corporation. The colony owns the land, the buildings, the machinery, the livestock, and every tool on the property. Individual families live in assigned housing units, modern homes, not cabins, but the homes belong to the colony. There are no paychecks. Members receive a small monthly allowance, in some colonies as little as $3 for personal spending. Everything else is provided: food, clothing, shelter, medical care, dental care, education. Meals are eaten communally. 3 times a day, the entire colony gathers in a dining hall. Men sit on one side, women sit on the other. The food is prepared by women between the ages of 15 and their mid-40s, working on a rotation. After their mid-40s, women shift to childcare in the colony nursery. The kitchen is not a family responsibility. It is a community operation, feeding 60 to 150 people daily. Every colony has assigned roles. A head preacher oversees spiritual life. A colony boss manages daily operations. A field boss runs the farming. A German teacher instructs children in language, religion, and Hutterite history. Decisions are made by a council of baptized men. Women do not vote. The head preacher serves as the link between the colony and the broader branch leadership. And here's where the Hutterites diverge most sharply from the Amish. They use technology. Tractors, combines, GPS-guided equipment, industrial-scale livestock operations, refrigeration, electricity, and computers for business. Some colonies have modern kitchens with commercial equipment that would not look out of place in a restaurant. The prohibition is not against technology itself, it is against individual ownership. The tractor belongs to the colony, the computer belongs to the colony. Nothing belongs to you. When a colony grows too large, typically around 150 people, it splits. The Hutterites call this branching out, and the process operates like cell division. The colony purchases land for a new settlement, builds the infrastructure, and then divides its families into 2 roughly equal groups. Sometimes the division is done by drawing lots. Sometimes families volunteer. The goal is balance. Each half should have a mix of skills, ages, and family structures sufficient to operate independently. The mother colony keeps its land. The daughter colony starts fresh. Both continue as autonomous communes under the same branch's oversight. Since Hutterites do not proselytize, they accept almost no converts. This expansion comes entirely from natural increase. Hutterite women historically average 8 or more children. That number has declined in recent decades, but the growth rate remains high enough that new colonies are established regularly across the prairies. This is how 50,000 people descended from 800 immigrants, not through conversion, through children, and through a system designed to replicate itself indefinitely. The 3 Anabaptist branches, Amish, Mennonite, and Hutterite, began in the same place, fled the same persecution, and read the same Bible. They arrived at 3 different answers to the same question: how should Christians live in a world that does not share their values? The Mennonites said, engage the world, change it from inside. Build universities, send missionaries, dress like your neighbors, drive their cars, use their technology, keep your faith, but carry it into the culture rather than away from it. The Amish said, separate from the world, build walls, reject its technology, its institutions, its values, worship in the home, dress plainly, drive buggies. Keep the community small enough that everyone knows everyone, and enforce the boundaries with shunning. The Hutterites said, separate from the world, but do it collectively. Own nothing individually. Eat together, work together, make every decision together. Use whatever technology serves the community, but let no person accumulate anything for themselves. Build colonies that function as self-sustaining organisms, and when one gets too large, divide it and start again. 3 answers, 3 communities, all still here, 5 centuries later. The Mennonites have 2 million members worldwide and operate global relief organizations. The Amish have 400,000 members and are doubling every 20 years. The Hutterites have 50,000 members in 500 colonies and have maintained unbroken communal living longer than any group in modern Western history. Each system costs something. Each system works. And each system was born from the same desperate question asked by a handful of persecuted believers in the mountains of Switzerland 500 years ago. If we truly believe what we say we believe, how far are we willing to go to live it? The Hutterites went the farthest. They gave up everything, not just electricity and cars, but ownership itself. And they are still here, on the prairies, eating together 3 times a day, splitting their colonies like cells, burying their dead in the same soil they farm, 5 centuries into an experiment that most people have never heard of. Now you have. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. We go inside the communities the world talks about, but never takes the time to understand. New content every week.